going to read you from one of my favorite books. Okay. This is page 101. I told you guys about this last night, and I read this part, and I thought, wow, I gotta see more of this. Now, yes, most of my channel is devoted to Eastern mysticism, and I'm for it. Again, you don't have to agree 100% with this stuff. I mean, it's very fun, and I like fun things. It's talking about the Black Mass. A Black Mass today would consist of blaspheming of such sacred topics as Eastern mysticism, psychiatry, the psychedelic movement, ultraliberalism, etc. Rationalism would be championed, drugs and their gurus would be defiled, acultural militants would be defied, and the decadence of ecclesiastical theologies might even be given a satanic boost. This satanic magus has always been the catalyst for the dichotomy necessary in molding popular beliefs. And in this case, a ceremony in the nature of a Black Mass may serve as a far-reaching magical purpose. And then it goes, in the year 1666, an interesting events occurred with the death of Francois Mensard, the architect of the trapezoid, whose geometrics were to become the prototype. Yeah, it goes on. Before that, explaining the Black Mass, it says, any ceremony considered a Black Mass must effectively shock and outrage, as this seems to be the measure of its success. In the Middle Ages, blaspheming the Holy Church was shocking. Now, however, the Church does not present the awesome image as it did during the Inquisition. The traditional Black Mass is no longer the outrageous spectacle to the dilettante or renegade priest that it once was. If the Satanist wishes to create a ritual to blaspheme an accepted institution for the purpose of psychodrama, he is careful to choose one that is not in vogue to parody. Thus, he is truly stepping on a sacred cow. And then it goes, a Black Mass today would consist of, and like that. But when I read this first part, any ceremony considered to be a Black Mass, and I went down, I did that on. The reason why I read the second part first was to give you an idea of, to give you what it said and then explain the idea. I love his views on sexuality too. He really, it's not what a lot of people would guess. A lot of people actually get offended by these things because he says, at the time he wrote this book in the late 60s, you had the swingers movement or orgies, and he had been around those, and he said, wait a second, they don't allow anything fetish in there. That's not cool. How do they call themselves sexual liberals, but yet any type of fetish or any type of dominance or bondage was shunned. And he also says, which I thought was great. He says, "Who says that that these modern ways are free? Celibacy is definitely sexuality, which I agree with. I think there are people out there who are asexual. If we assume that there are different genders, which I totally agree with. I'm transgendered, gay, and lesbian, which those are by nature two different. They're not. People say gay, and I think we have to distinguish between female homosexuality and male homosexuality, and then of course there's heterosexuality. But there also is asexual, and there's a lot of people who, in this day and age, they're not sexually liberated. They have their own confinements of it, and then they form a dogma around it. And then he goes into masturbation, how that can be just as gratifying, if not more, than with a partner. Creating your own scenario inside your head and things like that, where it was called before, that was trampled on, not only by people in the church, but also the movement in the '60s that said, "Oh, that's repression, this and that." And he says, "No, that's more creative. You can almost go beyond that." So to pick up this book and to expect something from it is to underestimate it. Uh, it really is something. There are few books that I can read over and over again. H.G. Wells' Time Machine is one. I've read that probably 3 times. Uh, I've reread The Planet of the Apes a couple times. The Pierre Boulle book. It's not, the movie was based off it, not it based off the movie. Pierre Boulle also wrote The Bridge on the River Kwai. But this book, when I read this book, I could not stop. I kept trying to reread it, and like it was a food, like I wanted to eat the thing. And then I went out and I got his uh the companion book to this. I think it's called The Satanic Rituals. Yeah, Satanic Rituals. I didn't really find that is interesting, and I went out and well, first I went out and got The Devil's Notebook, which I thought was awesome. I'm gonna actually read some of that on here. And he wrote the Satanic Witch, which is actually for women. And people said, "Well, where's the Satanic Warlock? When is that coming out?" Uh, or it's too bad he couldn't have written that. But his wife, I think Blanche Barton, I think is her name, or Blair something. Uh, she actually said, because he talks about the cunning sexuality of women. Actually, in here it gives a good idea of the concoctions of the different alluring types in there. And she said, no, the real intelligent people would be able to take the Satanic Witch and apply it to the different types of male sexuality there are, and go into that. But I think those people who see a book like the Satanic Bible, or see the Satanic Church, and come at it and think, oh, that's going to be about them cutting the heads off of cats, or raping children, or sacrificing people, or it's going to be, because I said, this book to a girl that I was uh, dating at the time, years and years ago. She said, "Oh," she said, "Oh, it's all like the hippie stuff," and I'm like, "Actually, it's anti-hippie." And she goes, "What?" And I'm like, "Well, how did you then just read the book?" She goes, "I want to be a Satanist." I said, "Okay, here, read this book." Well, no, I don't want to read it. Okay, you just want the label? He talks about that in here. Um, he always says the true Satanists are those who use what they have to gain power. He talks about the people who, the Satanists and the witches were never the ones burned at the stakes. They were the ones, the real witches were the ones sleeping with the cardinals and bishops, and pointed the finger at her enemies, to get them burned at the stake. And the real warlocks were the people who climbed up inside the church and gained power and wielded that power. Again, I have to say, this book, again, a lot of the topics, well, I already prefaced the video. I'm not used to apologizing for my ideas, and I usually never do it. But again, I'm talking like this because I still have that stuff under my tongue. But there is the want and the desire for me not to be misunderstood. So it's not really an apology of anything, because you guys know I am. Uh, Isn't it irritating? So irritating when you're just misunderstood. And you're like, no, I want to get my point across. Take a look at it. All right. Peace to you.